Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast, talking again about what happened in this week's big debate, Republican debate, what happened outside the big Republican debate. Joining us to discuss that is AJ Kaufman. You see him right here. He's got a new post up, well, not new as you're listening to this, but he does have a post up about the debate, breaking down the winners and losers of the debate, as well as a person who didn't show up for the debate. AJ, welcome back.
I am not a skinny guy with a funny last name, but I am here.
Yeah, well, he wasn't the first skinny guy with a funny last name either. That was Vivek Ramaswamy's, I guess, homage to Barack Obama. Is sort of a strange thing to throw into a GOP debate. But you know what? I did not react well to Vivek Ramaswamy, probably because it was colored. My perception of him was probably colored somewhat by his playing footsie with 9/11 truthers a couple days prior to the debate. But I do have to say that there's some evidence now that he may have hit the target here. A Washington Post poll, I just saw this a few minutes ago, has Ron DeSantis was declared the winner by 29% of respondents in this WAPO /538/Ipsos poll, Ipsos being the engine, I presume, for doing this. But Ramaswamy got 26%. Haley came in third with 15%. I mean, so I'm throwing that at you. Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't. I mean, it is a WAPO poll. It's not a Twitter poll or a Drudge Report poll. You may remember those Drudge Report polls in 2015 and 16 where the debate would start at 9 o'clock Eastern, and at 9:02, Donald Trump would be declared the winner of the debate with 88% saying he won the debate.
Right, yeah.
But I assume there's a little more science behind the WAPO poll. I'm a little surprised that DeSantis won because I thought he was people didn't attack him that much. Maybe that helped him, but I thought he was a little bit lackluster on some issues. He's still trying to find that lane between courting the Trump supporters who are never going to probably go to him, most of them, and the traditional conservative lane that Haley and Scott and Pence occupy. Vivek obviously is not worried about anyone but the Trump supporters. He probably is taking supporters away from Trump, but he's getting attention. He's obviously a well-spoken, energetic guy, but the week and a half prior to the debate, 9/11 conspiracy theories, saying nice things about Putin and about the Chinese imperialists, and even kind of drawing moral equivalence between Israel and the Islamists in the Middle East around them. And then, of course, the personal attacks and some of these straw man setups during the debate to get applause did not impress me personally. But he probably is, in my opinion, running to be in the cabinet or vice president of a potential Trump ticket. And that is what people like about him. At the same time, to donate money to this guy and get behind him, knowing I don't know that he's really running for president as much as an ambassador for Trumpism.
Yeah, it almost seemed like he was a bit of a stalking horse for Trump. First off, he sort of adopted Trump's debate strategy, which is to insult everybody else on the stage. Correct. And force them to come to him. Ron DeSantis very notably did not take the bait. And I think that was one of the things that, he had a very disciplined debate. I think there's been a couple of quibbles since then. It's come up, one with the raising the hands thing, which I think is a ridiculous debate moderator tactic in debates.
It is. I agree.
And then not being gracious enough to give Mike Pence his due for standing up for the Constitution. I thought Chris Christie had a really nice moment with that.
I think he did. I think he was correct too. I think everyone kind of stood with Pence on that, but DeSantis took a while. I think they had to ask him 3 times before he kind of said, "Yeah, Christie, you did." Well,
his argument was, "Why are we still talking about this? Why are we still talking about this?" And finally, the third time, he says, "I've already answered this before. Yeah, Mike did his job. I have no beef with Mike." But I think it would have been gracious just to say, "Yeah, I thought Mike stood up for the Constitution. Here's why I think this is stupid." But I think that was really the only notable mistake that DeSantis
is a little bit wishy-washy on Ukraine. His position is certainly, in my opinion, better than Vivek Ramaswamy's, but not as strong as the others, because he's not going to echo Tucker Carlson talking points like Vivek will. but he's also not going to be unequivocal talking about supporting Ukraine like Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, and others. So again,
Haley.
trying to find that middle ground and saying, we got to be careful. We got to, he's not giving the cliches about, if we weren't giving money to Ukraine, we would have already cured poverty in America and secured the border and cleaned up Maui and East Palestine all at the same time in one day.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Haley was very good on it.
Was.
Haley was very strong on foreign policy. I think Haley did better. We should really start running down the list here. So we started off with it. We started off with this, right? We started off talking about the poll and we'll see other polls that the campaigns will have their own metrics, whatever. These are not terribly scientific things, regardless of, it's better than, like you said, a Twitter poll. But it's not terribly scientific. I will say this, the one thing that I found interesting about the WAPO Ipsos 538 poll was they were actually polling before the debate and after the debate. And so there was also a metric that they compared between the two sets, which was the percentage of respondents that were willing to consider this person for a nomination. Now, DeSantis is actually ahead of Trump in this, 67% to 61% after the debate. And he moved up maybe a couple of points in the course of the debate. So he didn't lose anything, right? Basically, he stayed the same, because when you're dealing with the margins of error in this thing, I don't think you can say, oh, he gained 3 points. I think that's just basically margin of error. Trump basically stayed the same place he was at before, 61%. But Haley picked up 17 points in between those two samples. She went from 29% to 46%. And I think that that's actually probably, I think that's actually a thing. I think she may have surprised people by how strong she.
I think she probably did. Interesting numbers. I mean, you're a data guy, even more than I am, and I like the before and after from those polls. Haley's had a tough 6 months. I mean, she was the first one in after Trump. Trump got in like the day after the midterms, so it's kind of hard to compare. But Haley was, I think, right around Valentine's Day. She got in, so it's over 6 months. And she hadn't gained any traction. I'm not exactly sure why. I think she's an attractive candidate and obviously has the experience and probably would be a dynamite general election candidate. I can't imagine she wouldn't defeat Biden by attracting suburban women and really not being as vulnerable to attacks as Trump or DeSantis or some others. But she hadn't gained traction. But last night was I think I call it a vintage performance by her. She seemed informed, compelling. I think on foreign policy, she eviscerated Ramaswamy, in my opinion. And she understands right from wrong, good and evil. And she even had a nuanced position on abortion, which, whether you agree with it or not, and I haven't really decided, frankly, which side I'm on with that. She had a very nuanced, and I hate that word, but that's what her position was. And I think overall, she made every second count, because I believe, Ed, you correct me if I'm wrong on these numbers, when it came to the amount of time that each person spoke, she was not high up. It was like Pence, Ramaswamy, Christie, DeSantis, and then maybe Haley was fifth at best.
I think she may have been fifth. Yeah, I saw that graphic that went out, but CNN did the calculation immediately after the debate.
It's a fun job to have, counting those seconds, I'll tell you.
Can you imagine? Stopwatch.
Intern had to do that all night.
Yeah, exactly. You got 8 people doing this is what you've got.
Right.
So yeah, by the way, I'll just go over the numbers of the polls. It was 775 potential Republican primary or caucus voters who watched the August 23rd debate. Results have an error margin of plus or minus 4 percentage points. So at least a decent sized sample here. We're not talking about a focus group of 23 people, right? We're talking about a decent sized sample. And I think that when you pick up 17 points from one point to the other point, that says something. And I will say this. I mean, when I was writing my analysis this morning, and I was on with Hugh Hewitt last night. We're recording this on Thursday. You have to do these things in sort of a snap mode, right? You're going based off of your own perceptions of going through this. And my analysis was not short. I can say this today because it will not be a spoiler by the time this airs, but I think it is somewhat appropriate that the Wordle answer for today was wordy.
I just saying you were
1,700 word analysis.
You were loquacious with the pen and the keypad this morning.
Yeah, you might even say that I had diarrhea of the keyboard. It's and that's a trait that I know about it myself, right? So I'm aware. I'm aware. Send
You got to
letter.
have got to have word limits, Ed. Sometimes you got to cut yourself off at 800 or 1200 and just.
This is the reason why an editor is actually a pretty good thing, but you don't have to worry about space on a blog, except for the fact that you're going to tire readers out.
Yeah, right.
But it was a long debate, and there was a lot of people to cover, and there was a lot of stuff to cover. I mean, I wouldn't take any of that stuff out, but I just found it interesting that the wordle of the day was wordy, and then I wrote my post. Actually, I wrote the post before I solved the wordle puzzle.
Oh. This isn't. We don't need to discuss this today, but this might be one of the last debates ever, and I mean that in a sense. There's only one scheduled the rest of this term. They may add some. If Biden and Trump are the nominees, we are not seeing debates, and that might be the end of the debate era in this country. I mean, I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, but something makes me wonder. Like, I enjoy them, but there's only one more scheduled this round at this point.
I don't know that I enjoy them. I kind of dread them, to be honest with you.
They're only once every 8 years. I mean,
there's usually 15 of them every 4 years.
Right, well, they're not going to be 15, so you should be happy.
I should be happy because I don't think it's a particularly useful format, right?
Not with 8 people. No, with 3 or 4, maybe.
Yeah, one-on-one, definitely. Maybe
look, Ed,
4 tops. Right?
I'd be for Lincoln Douglas style out in the public park, 6 hours, no moderator, 2 people. I'd bring a glass of fruit punch and a cupcake, and I'd just sit there all day. But that's not what we have.
It's not what we have. And maybe we should think about that. Yeah, maybe we should think about that, because what happens to the candidates who just don't break through?
Like, and that leads us to Doug Burgum and Asa Hutchinson, doesn't it?
Well, and Tim Scott, right?
Yeah, Tim did not have his best night. It's not his best format.
It's not his format. He's much better extemporaneously up on the stump, striding across the stage with the microphone. This is not his strength. And he did not have a great night last night. I like Tim Scott, and I think he'd make a good president if he somehow could manage to get a nomination and get elected. But I don't know that he's a guy who could get elected or even get the nomination, because of the way that we run these things. And so I'm not necessarily going to lament if these debates disappear. But I don't think that they're going to, because I think there's just too much demand for it.
Yeah, well, that's true. But I think it's better when they're fewer people, and I'd spread at least a month between them, and we do have that. And I'm interested to see what the RNC does in terms of the rest of the fall and even early winter after the first primary. They start cutting back, but if they're not going to involve the so-called corporate mainstream media, it's going to be all on Fox, or maybe they'll throw a bone to Newsmax or Twitter or some internet company.
Salem.
Oh, was that a plug for the Morrissey hosting?
Hey, sure. I just got done saying how much I don't like the format. Let's put me in charge.
Live from Nacogdoches, Texas. It's the do you have them at Stephen F. Austin State there in Nacogdoches, Texas?
I don't know. I think we can rustle up something live from a cow patty out in Nacogdoches, Texas. It's
in the summer, yeah.
In the summer, yeah. It's exactly right. It's 112 degrees in the shade out here. Come on out for it. Whoever manages to survive is survivor.
You could also do it in International Falls, Minnesota in January for the other extreme.
There you go.
Okay,
and if you survive both of those extremes, well, I'll give you the nomination.
Doug Burgum would do well. He's from North Dakota.
So getting back to the people who didn't really catch fire. I mean, you take a look at this, and the only 3 people in this WAPO poll to get double digits, right, as the winner of the debate, whatever that means, were Ramaswamy, DeSantis in order: DeSantis, Ramaswamy, Haley. And after that, it's single digits. Mike Pence gets 7%, and Mike Pence had a lot to say.
He did have a lot to say. He was very assertive.
Yeah, didn't help. At least not according to these.
He got a lot more time. I mean, he might got the most time. He got a lot more time than I thought. And if he doesn't get a bump now, you got to wonder what his future is, and if he's even going to get to the promised land of Iowa, where I think he's resting his potential campaign future there. But he had a lot. He was feisty. I think he was correct, obviously, on what he did on January 6th, and he argued with Vivek, and other than that, I think it's a tough job for him, Ed, because he has to defend the Trump administration. At the same time, he has to basically explain why he thought it was a threat to democracy for the final 2 weeks when he became president, essentially.
But AJ, I mean, there were two different Mike Pences on stage, and neither one of them really worked for me. And I like Mike Pence. I've seen him a long time. And the problem with Mike Pence is that he gets this sort of self-important delivery thing where he slows down, he looks down, and then
Pastor Mike.
which is fine if you're going to be a pastor. And he does that better than Ted Cruz does. I will say that, right?
Yes, he does.
It's more authentic.
Pastor Ted's not
more authentic for Mike Pence to do that, but it is an affectation, right? That's not how Mike Pence converses with people normally. And then with that, you got mean Mike Pence, right? I'm going to go after you. I'm going to eviscerate you. Let me slow down and use small words for you, Vivek. And it's like, and bear in mind, because I went back and checked the transcript on this. Ramaswamy had not insulted Mike Pence. He had contradicted Mike Pence, but he hadn't insulted Mike Pence yet at that point. It was immediately after that Ramaswamy started insulting and attacking everybody. And Mike Pence said, let me slow down and use small words for you. I mean,
hadn't Ramaswamy already attacked Chris Christie, or maybe he had already been called the Chat GPT robot by that point?
No, it was after that.
Okay,
that was
already. They're both in a feisty mood, or Vivek was, but yeah, I understand.
Well, you knew it was coming, right? I mean, you could see it coming. It was coming. But no, that was very early on. It was one of the first exchanges with Ramaswamy. He had just introduced himself basically as, well, I'm the outsider, and it's time for, if the car is breaking down, you don't go back to the old generation of mechanics, you get a new generation of mechanics, whatever it was. It wasn't aimed at anybody. It wasn't personal, right? And Pence made it personal. And then, of course, Ramaswamy just got personal with everybody doing the whole Trump personal attack thing.
He was Trump Jr., Trump's grandchild.
He was Trump's
proxy.
Well, proxy, yeah,
ambassador.
That's the right word. He was Trump's proxy, and I think it's notable that the people who really liked Ramaswamy are basically in the Trump camp.
So that's the question, Ed. All these candidates talk about coalescing eventually around someone who could possibly go one-on-one with Trump, whether it's DeSantis or Haley or someone. But we hear about Trump's ceiling, 45, 50, 55%. But I would assume if Ramaswamy is getting double digits now, the majority of those Ramaswamy supporters are Trump people. Maybe a few are DeSantis, but so Trump has a higher ceiling than even the polls let on, because we always were led to believe that almost all of Trump supporters are with him, and there's no one else they're going to support. But a lot of them do like the kid from Cincinnati, Ohio, because he is a miniature version of Trump. He's an acolyte, and he's espousing the same kind of personal attacks and similar populistic policies and jargon.
Well, yeah, but I mean he's hardly alone in that, right? Because we heard some of that from other people.
No, but he has the most of it. He's very well trained. He has the most of it.
But I mean, so yeah, I mean, the idea that he's collecting his own base, I think, is a little suspect. I think what he's collecting are people that like Trump, but because Trump's not in the debate, they'll swing over to Ramaswamy for the purposes of knocking out Ron DeSantis, knocking out Nikki Haley, to a certain extent, the others who are on stage. And both of us wrote extensively about that. I want to talk about Chris Christie. I know I irritated people today. Chris Christie had a great debate. It's not going to do him a damn bit good, and you can see it in the poll. Nobody wants Chris Christie as the nominee. But I thought he had a great debate. He was the most relaxed guy up there. He was the most relaxed guy up there. He was having the most fun up there. And I think that I think he was a little disappointed that he couldn't go after Trump for directly, but Ramaswamy made a pretty good stand-in for him in that same sense. Yeah, I mean, I actually enjoyed Chris Christie being on stage.
He was the only one up there who has been in a presidential debate. So far as I know, I think of the other seven, none of them have ever run for president of the United States. He made some poignant remarks about being president and what it means to be president. He turned the silly UFO question. Sorry for the UFO fans out there. The awkward, silly Martha McCallum UFO question that was thrown at him. He turned that into a way to explain what a president is all about.
Right.
I think he was good on Ukraine. He talked about going there and what the consequences are. He had numbers and examples. And he talked about the January 6th attacks and how he won't, I believe the quote was, bow to anyone who disrespects the Constitution. And he got booed for that. But what he's saying is, I don't think anyone wants to bow to someone who disrespects the Constitution. Now, people can disagree whether or not Trump did that. I would say he disrespected it, but that's me. I'm not voting for Chris Christie or Donald Trump personally. So, yeah, I think Christie had a good night. He's a bit of a phony at times. Last time he ran, he was a bit of a phony, especially the way he backed out and ran to Trump's side. But I think he also had the high ground on a lot of issues last night and had a good evening.
Well, I think he had a really great debate. It's not going to do him a damn bit of good. I mean, so this is where you do the style points, right? Well, Christie gets 10 out of 10 for style, but it's not, doesn't count towards
Chris Christie and style, two words that you liked the suit, didn't you? Okay. Huh?
I did. The suit was great. But the but
can we talk about Doug Burgum and Asa Hutchinson, or are you just going to leave me hanging?
That's what I was going to talk about. I like Doug Burgum, and they ended up basically in the same spot, which is basically afterthoughts. But they're two very different things, because I thought Burgum had really good, interesting things to say. And I thought Asa Hutchinson spent more time saying nothing than anybody I've ever seen in a debate. So sometimes I was like, what are you trying to say, man?
I guess I can't remember a lot of what he said, so you may be right. But I think he had, I think whether I wrote this or not, if this were 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, before this era we're in, whatever you want to call this era, the Twitter, Google, whatever era.
Right, social media era.
Social media. So we only need to go back 20 years then. This are 2000. These two guys would be solid candidates. They're both successful governors of red states. Now, you can argue that red states are easier to govern when you're pretty much have an electorate that 70% supports you, but they're still, North Dakota is a very difficult state in many ways to govern. And so is Arkansas. They're for different reasons, and they were successful. Burgum grew up in a town of 300 people and became a billionaire as a software engineer, a designer, sold his company to Microsoft. Hutchinson has incredible experience in the public sector. They're both cogent people. And, obviously neither of them has a chance, but I thought they were, especially Burgum, I agree. I've seen him interviewed. I've heard him speak. I heard him at the Reagan dinner in Des Moines, I guess it was a while back. He's excellent. And, they probably have a cabinet position for him if he in a Republican administration, but certainly this is not the era for guys like that. But I certainly didn't think they embarrassed themselves.
I don't think Asa made a case for him even being on the stage. Burgum did. Burgum had some really interesting things to say. You were talking about the abortion debate, and I thought his answer during the discussion, I would say, the abortion discussion was very good. And here's the thing about the abortion discussion. I'm sitting there, my wife and I are kind of abortion absolutists, right? We are. So I'm all the way over on one side of this, but I recognize that the country's not there, right? I actually agreed in large part with everything everybody was saying because they all were right about certain things, right? And so that's, to me, that was the interesting part of that. I think that they spent too much time on it.
Did you notice, though, that Ramaswamy did not participate in the abortion discussion? I found that telling. It doesn't surprise me.
I guess I hadn't realized that. Not everybody participated in every.
I think only Christie and he did not participate in that, and that was Christie's not a social conservative. I mean, he might be a social conservative, but it's not his MO. And Ramaswamy being a populist, he will say he's pro-life, but it's not his number one issue. So they weren't involved. I think everyone else was involved, and I do agree with you. That was the most interesting, introspective, erudite part of the debate. And Burgum was also good, I'll mention, on energy, which makes sense being from North Dakota, and on China as a businessman, and not a businessman like some, Michael Bloomberg and others, who will pacify and appease China just to be, a businessman. Burgum actually understands the dangers there.
Yeah, no, I thought he had a great line at the very beginning when he said, all we're doing is trading OPEC for Sinopec.
Yeah, I love that line. I think I heard it before.
I hadn't heard it before. It's a great line. I assumed that this was.
It's also accurate.
Yeah,
good lines are better when they're accurate.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly, and it was on point about energy. He was ahead of Haley on the whole battery issue. He talked about the battery issue, and then like 15 minutes later, the energy thing came up, or China came up. I forget which one it was. And Haley basically said exactly the same thing. It was like, is she not paying attention?
Sometimes they have their talking points.
Well, that was it. And you have to force people off their talking points a little bit, which is why I like the abortion discussion. I just think that they needed to consolidate it a little bit more. This is there's other issues to talk about, but overall, I thought it was not a bad debate. You know, with the exception of the Ramaswamy distraction.
Sounds like a good movie.
Yeah, it's sort of like, you know, the parallax view, the Ramaswamy distraction.
Right, exactly.
It's like a 1970s, you know, intrigue thriller, the Ramaswamy distraction.
Yeah. Yep. Straight out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and starring Vivek and Trump as his sidekick, or vice versa.
I want to know what Ramaswamy's chili is. I didn't realize he was from Cincinnati, so you got to find out what his chili is.
God, I hope it's Skyline, because Skyline is better than Gold Star, and I do take my chili seriously when I'm in Southwestern Ohio.
Well, there you go. That's what I'm talking about right there. Skyline is I think sort of the gold standard. I forget which one I had that I liked, and it was in this place where there's a lot of political meetings and stuff going on. It's not a chain. It was a one-off, and
George Washington. There's a George Washington chili in a rough part of town. That's a single standing one, but chili is taken seriously because it's a topping chili. We don't need to get too into it, but it's got a little ginger, a little coconut. It's not a hearty chili, and you put it on your hot dog or your pasta. And if you're ever in Northern Kentucky or Southwest Ohio, you know, that's the place to go. In and out in about 20 minutes, and your bill will be usually under $20 for two people, and you're good to go. Just make sure there's a rest area along the way.
Yeah, if you're from the Southwest and you order chili, beware, it's not what you think it is.
Right, that's true too.
Very different than what you think it is. But it's good. As long as you're prepared for it, it's good. And I enjoyed it when I was there. All right. Look, I mean, we got to talk a little bit about Trump. I know he's your favorite guy.
I got the Rambo poster right next to me on the wall.
Well, there you go. He didn't participate in this one. He's not going to participate in the next one. He did Tucker. Now, I didn't watch that, but I read the entire transcript.
You like reading transcripts, don't you?
I do. I'll tell you why. I read fast.
A Trump transcript must be really interesting. There's got with the jargon that he uses.
It worked. I mean, I was fine with it. And the thing is that, you know, I know it got a lot of views on Twitter. Now that metric
that's a very dubious.
Twitter will tell you that, you know, you got to be careful about how you view this thing, because if you just scroll past it and it starts to roll, it's a view. It only takes 1 or 2 seconds to register.
250 million views in an hour. Yeah.
I'm
greatest viewership ever.
I'm sure that there were several million intended views. I mean, I'm sure of that because of Tucker's thing. There was nothing new in that interview. Did you? I mean,
let me read you my article, what I wrote, because I didn't listen, watch it, or even I forgot about it. And all I can say is I have an excerpt here saying, I cannot imagine they discussed anything substantive other than grievance and debunked conspiracies from 3 years ago. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they discussed, you know, abortion. Maybe they discussed energy policy. But Trump doesn't do policy.
No, that's not true. I mean, he talks about border policy in here. He does talk about energy policy. So there were some policy discussions, but it's basically rehashing the bullet points. And Tucker really doesn't press on anything. I mean, Tucker talked to him about Jeffrey Epstein, for crying out loud.
Vital issue in 2023.
Do you think Jeffrey Epstein killed himself? What the hell is that?
And Trump probably, I don't even want to know what he said, but not important to me.
He actually didn't take a position. He just said, well, I don't know. You know,
good. Smart.
He came down a lot, and so maybe he was depressed. But on the other hand, who knows? It's, you know,
a lot of Epstein supporters out there would have been upset if he had taken a position.
Right, exactly. I mean, you know, and that's not on Trump. That's on Tucker.
No, that's conspiracy stuff. That's what Tucker thrives on.
I mean, he had an opportunity here to say, okay, look, I know that this is going to be seen as a softball thing because Trump's just trying to upstage the debate and I'm just trying to upstage Fox, but I'm going to at least make it worth people's while by asking a few tough questions. And there just wasn't any. The toughest he got in the interview was on Chris Wallace. Have you seen the part about Chris Wallace?
No, I haven't paid attention to it at all because I figured most of it was not interesting to me. Honestly.
You got to watch the part about Chris Wallace, or read the transcript of the part about.
Yeah, I was gonna
Chris.
say I'll read the transcript because apparently that's faster.
It's yeah, I can tell you
That's the personal vendetta stuff. Even if you agree with Trump on that, I mean, it's just.
Well, look, I mean, yeah, it's a personal vendetta, I think, or I don't even know if it's personal. You know, obviously Trump doesn't have anything nice to say about Chris Wallace, but neither does Tucker Carlson. He calls him
Right.
a fussy little man.
Well, that's kind.
Yeah, I mean, it's gratuitous, right? And
Yeah,
it overall gives the impression that here's a couple of guys who are collaborating, and rather than a journalist, relationship.
I'm glad I didn't see it. I would just say about Trump, I still haven't decided whether he was smart or unwise to skip the debate. I mean, front runners don't usually skip debates. I think Reagan did one. Maybe Mitt Romney, when he's a front runner, did. But maybe George Bush the elder, did. But going on Tucker kind of cements what I think you would agree with me on, that Trump is not looking to broaden his appeal. You know, when you've alienated, or you're not going to get the votes of 60 to 65% of Americans, going on Tucker is certainly not going to make that number go lower. The caucuses are coming up faster than we realize. We're almost September, and they're in mid-January. They're a little earlier, and but it won't matter because his supporters, in my opinion, have an emotional connection to him, and nothing's going to dissuade them. They're into policy on some things, but he's not going to lose their support if he goes on Tucker and talks about conspiracy theories and Jeffrey Epstein. But on the other hand, could he have grabbed some supporters by being on stage last night? And maybe. I don't know. With Vivek there, it's hard to say.
Well, I think if he's there, then maybe Vivek isn't, right? Or
That's a good point.
Or that they tag team, right?
Interesting.
But I think it was good for the other candidates to not have Trump on stage, because it really allowed them to talk about themselves. And other than the Vivek distractions, I think that there were some really good, interesting discussions and debate about actual policies.
I agree with that. And the Democrats were, I know it's a cliche thing, it's part of their partisan, but to say that it was all MAGA up there all the time and nothing was discussed it's just disingenuous. There were good discussions, and it wasn't all MAGA all the time. So, those press releases are really, really just dishonest.
Yeah. Welcome to primary politics.
I write press releases now for other entities, but I try not to make them pure propaganda.
You don't want to sell your soul, man. Well, we're kind of at the end of this. I just want to ask you, I'll ask you your opinion on that question. Do you think that Donald Trump is going to reconsider after this? He was not really, other than the part that was specifically about Donald Trump, which everybody else on stage tried to limit and change the subject on. I mean, he wasn't really relevant to most of that discussion last night. Do you think that that's something that he will want to change and force that back? Or do you think it's going to take a real polling shift before he gets anxious enough to rejoin the debate structure?
I think it might depend on whether they have debates in October, November, December, like they have in the past. I don't think he'll show up at Reagan Library unless
he won't. He's got a beef with the Reagan Library anyway.
Of course he does. Okay, beef with Reagan Library. I add that to my list. Okay. Well, I think he'll eventually miss some of the gratuitous coverage from his supporters. He'll miss being out there. So if there are future debates in the fall and early winter, I think he will definitely reconsider. I will say, if it's Trump against Biden, I don't see any debates happening. I know we're getting ahead of ourselves there, but I don't see any debates, which would be a first in the past 60 years or so. So, but to answer your question, I think probably he will reconsider beyond the Reagan Library, regardless where the polls tighten. I think he'll want to get the attention.
I think you're right. And I think maybe if it narrows down on stage, it'll be easier.
Oh, that too. Right. That's a given. It's got to narrow down a little bit. Yes.
All right, so that's what we'll watch for. Where can people watch for you, AJ?
Well, they can read the transcript of what I write. Is there a transcript for this podcast? There really should be.
There actually is. I just don't usually post it in full.
Oh,
but I do have an AI thing that Zoom offers.
Is Vivek Ramaswamy covering
It's
this?
Ramaswamy GPT. That's what I use, is Ramaswamy GPT. That was, by the way, Chris Christie. That nailed Ramaswamy. I'm sorry, that was a good line.
Everyone liked that, left and right. They all liked it.
Yeah.
They can read me, as always, at lidblog.com. I do still get some articles in israelnationalnews.com. And like I always say, if you pick up a small town paper or a business journal in Minnesota or Ohio or Southwest Virginia or parts of East Tennessee, you may come across my name. You probably will come across my name. I'm everywhere at once. That's the beauty of the internet.
That is indeed the beauty of the internet. All right. Well, AJ Kaufman, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon, sir.
Thank you.